Hi everyone, my name is Anna Forsberg and I'm going to share with you a testimony about what God has been doing in my family. God is passionate about family, right? Well, before I share with you what God has done in my family, I just first want to say that there's nothing great or amazing about my family. What God has done for us, He would love to do for you and your families as well. In fact, the Hebrew root word for the word testimony means to do again. So as I share this testimony with you, I hope that hope and desire are stirred up in your heart, that your prayer would be, God, do it again in my family. So I'm just going to share a very condensed version of what God has done. There's really so much that God has been doing in so many lives in my family that I could never share it in a small amount of time. But it began a little over 2 years ago when I was down in Kansas City for one of the One Thing conferences with two of my sisters and one of my nieces. We went over to my uncle and aunt Mark and Karen Anderson's house for a time of prayer over our family. And as we prayed there, Mark and Karen both felt strongly that God was speaking to us about our family through Joel chapter 2, verse 15. And it says in that section in verse 15, it says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, declare a holy fast, call a sacred assembly, gather the people, consecrate the assembly, bring together the elders, gather the children, those nursing at the breast. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her chamber. Let the priests who minister before the Lord weep between the temple porch and the altar. Let them say, spare your people, O Lord. Do not make your inheritance an object of scorn, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the nations, or among the peoples, where is their God? Then the Lord will be jealous for his land and take pity on his people." Joel chapter 2 goes on to say that I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. The other verse that God highlighted to us was out of 1 Corinthians 7:14, where it talks about the believing family member sanctifying the unbelieving spouse and the children. We knew that God was telling us that we needed to call all of the family together for prayer and fasting, and we were to stand on those verses from 1 Corinthians about the believing family member sanctifying the rest of the family. So when the rest of us that were down for the One Thing conference came back to Minnesota, I called up a bunch of my siblings that lived in the area and told them what happened during our time of prayer in Kansas City and what God spoke to us through Mark and Karen. I asked if they would be willing to meet together and pray. Almost every person said yes. I was actually a little shocked that it was so easy and it happened so quickly. But I knew in my heart that that was because God was already at work in their hearts. And now, before you think, well, that's just my family, that would never happen in your family, and I don't know your family, let me just tell you that I'm one of 17 children. Yes, 17. It's a yours, mine, and ours kind of thing. In short, my mom got pregnant at 15, had 9 kids with her first husband, who was an alcoholic and eventually left her with 9 kids. She remarried my dad, who had 4 kids from his previous marriage, and together they had 4 more. None of my parents, including my dad's first wife and my mom's first husband, were raised in godly homes, nor did they even know the Lord until shortly before I was born. It reminds me a lot of a line from a Misty Edwards song, "Broken fathers break their children." And in this case, broken parents broke their children. So when I was calling up my family members and asking them to meet for prayer, I was calling up people who had long histories of addiction, divorce, children out of wedlock, and pursuit of worldly pleasures. One of my siblings had been an alcoholic since he was 15 and had just reached his first year of sobriety at the age of 50. Other family members had a history of worldliness, partying, and living for themselves, and almost no history whatsoever of going to church or pursuing God. Others were like I had been, lukewarm. We thought we loved God, but really we loved being comfortable in our worldly comforts more. So for the most part, we were a group of people who were at different stages in our walks with the Lord, and the majority, like I mentioned, had long histories of brokenness. But we met and we began to join together and ask the Lord for mercy and breakthrough and for help to walk in his ways. Now today we've been meeting together for a little over 2 years to seek the Lord and to pray for all of our family members. And God has done some amazing and miraculous things. To highlight just a few, my brother, who was an alcoholic most of his life, volunteered to host our first prayer meeting, and his house is still one of the main homes that we meet in. My mother's first husband and second wife regularly come to family prayer and have taken up the mantle to consistently pray for all their kids and grandkids, and they're believing and asking the Lord that not one family member would be lost. It's truly a demonstration of the restorative power of God to see a father who for a long history, a long season of his life had lost the role of fathership over his kids, now lead his children and many grandchildren in prayer. God is so good. His mercy is just so astounding and amazing. I believe that today God is looking for others who are willing to stand between the temple porch and the altar and weep and fast and pray for their families. Maybe for some of you, there are only 2 people in your family that you can think of that would maybe meet and pray. Well, one person with God is a majority. One person standing on the word of God, interceding on behalf of their family, is all it takes to change the spiritual condition of your family. I believe that, like many Christian leaders have been saying for at least the last 5 years, probably longer, that revival is coming to America. And the Lord has been consistently impressing upon my heart that one of his favorite ways to bring revival is through families. But first, he needs people who are willing to set a stake in the ground and say, yes, I will intercede on behalf of my family members. So I just want to encourage you that if this moves in your heart at all, to go home and talk to the Lord about it. And if maybe you've done this in the past and it hasn't worked out like you thought and you got discouraged, I just want to also encourage you to ask the Lord to impress upon your heart more of what he feels about your family members. Because at times where my heart's grown dull or I've been discouraged, I've asked the Lord to give me more of what he feels about my family members. And it's encouraged me. And then it's not been hard to pray at all. It's actually been hard not to pray. So I just want to encourage you that if this moves in your heart, to go ask the Lord about it, to talk to him, and to take up that mantle to pray for your family. Thank you.